closed her laptop and assumed that that would disconnect the call, which it didn't.
They need help, they need backup, something has to be done here.
Controversial comments by an executive about Woodbridge long-term care operator. Now the province has moved to take control of the home hit by a COVID-19 outbreak. The executive vice president of a major long-term care home operator is out of her job tonight. It comes after her comments were accidentally overheard during a virtual meeting with concerned families. Chris Glover is live in Woodbridge at Vista Care Community. Chris, the province is now moving to take over that home.
That's right. The province was so concerned with the spread of COVID-19 at this facility that today it announced that a local hospital network would be taking over interim control of this facility. But many of the families that I've spoken to have said that their concerns predate the COVID crisis. And so last night they got a chance to voice some of their concerns to the upper management of the company that runs this facility. And on that call, they had at times some combative and some angry complaints to raise. However, it was what happened after that virtual town hall that has led to the now departure of the executive vice president of the company that runs this facility.
Properly trained and qualified personnel.
Let me take your question now. I'm going to talk to you about staffing and I'll give you...
Joanne Dykeman, Vice President of Operations with Sienna Senior Living, fielding concerns last night from families of people living in Woodbridge Vista Care Community. Right after this virtual town hall, Dykeman left her mic on.
Oh, God. Woodbridge. Yeah. I think I did okay.
Joanne closed her laptop and assumed that that would disconnect the call, which it didn't. I had my Bose speakers on and I heard every word she said.
Nick Popolo's mom, living in the home, tested positive for COVID-19. He heard the powerful executive mocking families, in addition to implying families were hoping to score money with a lawsuit. Sienna is already the subject of lawsuits for its handling of the COVID crisis from families at a home in Ottawa and Scarborough.
It just shows the type of ignorance that the board of directors have and the lack of compassion that they have for the people that are in here. They don't care.
Stop forward, save our seniors before it's too late. Take over Woodbridge Vista.
Without even knowing, the province had given temporary control of Woodbridge Vista to a local hospital network. Families protested today. 17 residents have died of COVID-19 there, and 17 others were taken to hospital because the home admitted they couldn't meet their needs.
That's me. She's interrupting me. And all she did was interrupt. That's all she did.
Angela Zuccarelli wanted answers last night about her dad's care and said Dykeman's conduct during the meeting was bad enough.
But if she's shutting me down, imagine what they're doing to those people who are voiceless in there. Imagine, behind closed doors. It's one thing to appear one way in front of me, but the reality of what happens behind closed doors is the reality of why we're here.
But now hearing the class action, blood-sucking comments shook her.
You're the ones who are worried about the bottom line, which is why we are here today. We're not worried about a cent.
The union representing health workers there reports more than 24 staff were infected with the coronavirus. But Rep. Ken Evett says Dykeman's comments were the last straw.
Shame on her. She should resign from her position immediately.
In a statement to CBC Toronto, Sienna Senior Living said effective immediately, Joanne Dykeman is no longer with Sienna Senior Living. While she is deeply regretful of the comments she made yesterday evening, she also understands that they do not meet either her expectations nor those of Sienna Senior Living.
To say it was shocking would be an understatement from what we last saw of her.
Lucia Farcassi's mom died last Monday.
It's 85 degrees up there. It's unbelievably hot.
We were wilting in there, wilting. I can imagine her.
The night of her passing, Farcassi and her husband got to say goodbye.
We were singing to her, but then I realized, she needs to go be with my dad.
Her mom tested negative for COVID-19 3 times just days before her passing.
Neglect, dehydration, or a broken heart. That's what she passed of.
Yeah, broken heart for sure.
And Dwight, one of the families who has a parent in this facility is seriously considering taking their parent out of the facility, removing them from this situation altogether. I wanted to follow up with them, so I touched base with them late this afternoon and ran past them the fact that, you know, the hospital network was going to be taking control of things and the executive vice president was no longer in her job. I asked if that changed things for them, and they said they were still seriously considering whether or not they would remove their mom from this facility.
Chris, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
My brother, we did a lot of things together. We made banana mayonnaise sandwiches together, you know. It was a family thing, you know.
Music, prayer, and fond memories of a life lived. Mourners fill an auditorium in Minneapolis to celebrate George Floyd. Family, civil rights leaders, and Hollywood stars were on hand to pay tribute to a man whose death has galvanized a worldwide movement for equality. And today's ceremony in Minneapolis, the eulogy was delivered by one of America's best-known civil rights leaders. Susan Ormiston has more.
It's time for us to stand up in George's name and say, get your knee off our necks.
It was as much a civil rights revival here at a university in Minneapolis as Reverend Al Sharpton, the civil rights activist, thundered a message to the crowd here to honor George Floyd, who died in Minneapolis just over a week ago. Sharpton invoked the idea of a white police officer's knee on a black man's neck as echoes down in history, and said this is a rare moment in American history to reform the criminal justice system and make a better country for all its citizens. The family's lawyer, Ben Crump, said that what happened that day was tantamount to torture, and the 3 officers who are implicated in his death appeared at the same time in a Minneapolis court. The judge set bail at $750,000 for each of them. They face charges of aiding and abetting murder. A 4th officer is charged with 2nd-degree murder. There was lots of singing and praising the Lord, and really a celebration of Floyd's life, but also a recognition, says Sharpton, that this death has changed things. He said he has hope for the future, given the breadth of the response, the blacks and whites marching in the last week, all ages, and he invoked people not to let this opportunity pass. Floyd's casket, which was here, will go to Houston over the weekend, where a formal funeral is planned for Tuesday. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Minneapolis.
Defunding the police has been one of the calls in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, while the city of Los Angeles has announced they will cut their police budget. Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders says a lot needs to happen before he can talk about reducing the budget here. Talia Ritchie joins us live now from Toronto Police Headquarters. And Talia, the chief addressed the issue earlier today.
That's right, Dwight. And a lot of people here are calling for the police budget to be defunded. Currently, the Toronto police budget is over $1 billion. And right now, there's a letter going around online asking people to sign it and send it to their elected officials. It calls for defunding the Toronto police budget and expanding community-led health and safety initiatives. Now, Chief Saunders said that community is a big part of the budget, and he wouldn't commit to cutting it amid what he says is growing gun violence in the city.
When we talk about the gun violence and the number of handguns that are here and the number of guns that are being used, right now we've got a responsibility, we've got a role, and that role is to keep the community safe. Now we need other agencies to help offload those responsibilities of helping the at-risk, of helping the high-risk. Then we can start talking about the reduction. But until then, it would be naive to reduce police officers who right now, when you look at the numbers versus the calls, we're not near where we need to be as a community.
Now, Saunders says he's also been pushing hard to get body cameras for officers and says that initiative is close to the finish line. He says body cameras will increase transparency for both officers and the community, but Dwight, he wouldn't commit to a timeline or cost for that yet.
Yeah, that will definitely increase the police budget. Now, Chief Saunders also addressed potential protests in the city this weekend.
That's right. There have been talks of more protests happening this weekend, and that follows last weekend when thousands of people took part in a rally downtown last Saturday to protest racism around the world and to demand answers in the death of Regis Korchinski-Paquette. He says Toronto police have a plan and they have resources, but he also says he understands the protesters. Saunders addressed that obviously people are still angry and they're passionate, and he said they have the right to be. He shared his thoughts on George Floyd's death today.
Any law enforcement officer that I can think of that did not have a horrible feeling in their stomach when they saw what happened to George Floyd. It still bothers me. I mean, I have kids, and, you know, I'm running the organization as chief. That is not what law enforcement is trained to do. We're there to preserve life. We're there to enhance community safety. And when you see that, I mean, they'll have their day in court. But I will tell you, I was offended by it.
Now, some businesses have boarded up their windows just in case things get out of hand this weekend. But Chief Saunders says he expects the protests in Toronto will remain peaceful. Dwight?
Thank you, Talia. Now, Toronto's police chief also says his officers are not trained to put their knee to the neck of someone they are restraining. That practice, of course, under scrutiny following George Floyd's death. But as Lorenda Redikoff reports, the maneuver is used by one GTA police service.
Yo, get off of him.
This form of subduing someone is seen in a different light to many people now, given the death of George Floyd.
There have been recent discussions on the use of knee-to-neck restraint techniques, and I want to be clear that this organization does not, and I repeat, does not train to this. Our members are trained to knee-to-neck belt line techniques.
If you have your knee on his neck.
But that doesn't appear to be the case in Durham Region. A spokesperson says it is a tactic that may be used. The police service says the independent civilian police oversight body investigated this case and found no wrongdoing. But many members of the public have called to express concern. The police force says officers were apprehending a 16-year-old under the Mental Health Act. No charges were laid. Police say he was bleeding with a cut on his hand. There had been reports of someone with a knife.
They're only supposed to escalate to greater force if there's some degree of threat. And in the part of the video I saw, he was a young man lying on the ground, completely immobilized, and yet who was continuing to be struck and have his throat compressed. So I thought that was incomprehensible to me.
This former police chief says police services sometimes take another look, even if officers are found to be acting within protocol.
Just because it's within the standards, in compliance with standards, could there have been a different action that could have been taken? There still might be areas and avenues for improvement.
And questions remain about unconscious bias.
Studies have shown time and time again that Black males in general are perceived to be more threatening and dangerous. So even though it might be a sanctioned approach, there's a lot of discretion on the part of police officers when they use those approaches in terms of the perception of danger.
You have no reason to search that kid.
And in Durham Region, in response to the case in Minneapolis, a statement from the police chief says it's listening to people in the community, continuously improving training and education. Lorenda Redikoff, CBC News, Toronto.
Doug Ford has come under fire for this week for flip-flopping on whether systemic racism exists in Canada and in Ontario. Well, today the government announced a youth council that will focus on equality, and that's drawing a lot of fire from the opposition. Lisa Shing looks at the government's record on anti-racism.
Yeah, I'm going up to yonder.
As mourners attend a memorial for George Floyd, an acknowledgement from the Ford government.
This pain has not gone unnoticed.
Their response, a new council focusing on education, skills training, and employment for youth.
We were all dealing with a pandemic, which brings its health issues. Then you had on the economic issues on top of that. You add on the fact that we have constraints, rightfully so, on how our communities can gather and support one another. And then you add, then the fourth layer on top of all of that has been this weight of racism.
But Liberal MPP Michael Coteau points out.
The Premier's Youth Opportunities Advisory Council existed 2 years ago, and Doug Ford got rid of that. So it's just a bit disappointing.
Thanks, Andrew.
Coteau was also the previous government's minister in charge of anti-racism. That position was eliminated when the PCs took power.
They don't think it's important enough to have its own portfolio.
After a week where the Premier backtracked on whether there's systemic racism in Canada, critics say his government's track record falls flat.
They have not really lived up to its promise and has not given anti-racism the priority that it's due.
Avi Go helped shape the previous government's legislation on anti-racism that passed in 2017. She points to several decisions the PCs have made. The Anti-Racism Directorate was established 4 years ago to help eliminate racism from government policymaking, decisions, and programs. Now, when the Ford government came into power, it eliminated 4 subcommittees associated with that directorate.
We're continuing to support the Anti-Racism Directorate, and at the same time, we're continuing to build on our Black Youth Action Plan.
Go says if the government were truly committed, it would start by mandating all ministries and departments collect race-based data to better inform policymaking. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
When COVID hit, it really made the state of the justice system explode.
The pandemic has forced Ontario's antiquated justice system into the 21st century. Coming up in about 5 minutes. It is not a complaint, Colette, but yes, the heat is back.
The heat is back, and in fact, I'm really excited about something, Dwight. You know, meteorologists, we get excited sometimes about the small things, but as of 4 p.m., Markham, Ontario, our Markham, Ontario, not just the hot spot in Ontario, but the hot spot in all of Canada at 30.7 at Buttonville Airport. So just love to see that. Now coming down a little bit, those temperatures easing up. 27 for Markham, Oshawa at 26, 28 in Toronto, and St. Catharines at 26. Hamilton, you're just a little bit cooler there, 25. You factor in the humidity. The dew points aren't actually that high. We've got mid-teens, some higher teens down towards St. Catharines and Hamilton. But it is a little bit sticky out there. We had a nice breeze from the west today, especially near the lake, and that kind of made things feel a bit better. But look at those winds now, really easing up, with the exception there of St. Catharines, where you're getting that southwesterly breeze at about 30 kilometers an hour. So you're not seeing really anything but some of that increase in cloudiness here on the satellite imagery. But I just want to take you now to the models. See how it wants to pop in. This is just 7 o'clock. A couple of little showers showing up as that hotter air mass is getting close towards the lake. I don't think we'll see much. They'd be highly isolated if we do. A little bit of patchy fog near the lake is possible overnight tonight, but otherwise we're really looking at a nice start to the day on Friday, and then as a front approaches and a new air mass that's going to cool things down for the weekend, just back to seasonal. As that comes in later in the day on Friday, not only some showers, but we do get into some thunderstorms, and then those will clear out by about 11 and things improve for us again for that weekend. 16 tonight, 29, feeling like 35 tomorrow, Dwight.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. Take advantage of special offers now. It's hard to stop a Trane.
While it may feel like patio season, it doesn't look like patio season. They've been sitting empty with restaurants closed during the pandemic, but not for long. The City of Toronto will allow restaurants and bars to expand their patios, increasing the number of tables outside once they get the green light to reopen. Alicia Son has the story.
This is the patio here. As you can see, it's quite wide.
The folks at Great Lakes Brewery have been waiting for this day. They've already been mapping it out.
Our capacity is about 40 to 50, so I would think just given sort of the rough guide of the percentage that we're allowed, we're looking at about 15 to 20 people, but at least we'll have some people able to enjoy a pint. Obviously, we'll have to take a lot of precautions with sanitizer and gloves and taking money and tapping instead of cash. The bar and hospitality industry is probably one of the hardest hit through COVID, with the largest amount of layoffs and bar closures, let alone all the breweries that were sitting on inventory and all the beer that's got to get disposed of, unfortunately.
Today, some good news. The city announced patio season will resume. When exactly?
It isn't clear at this moment exactly when that will happen. I'm hearing reports that it will be part of the stage 2 reopening, but we have no confirmation of that. But we want to make sure the city and that the individual bar and restaurant owners are ready to proceed.
Dubbed Cafe TO, businesses will be able to expand or build new patios onto sidewalks, streets, parking lots to allow for physical distancing. And they're waiving the permit fees, even though the city could use the money right now.
You know, we have financial problems, but in the end, I think the city overall will be much healthier in the broadest sense if we allow these businesses to get back on their feet and to stay on their feet.
There's still a lot of the patio season for these restaurants and bars to capitalize on.
Yeah, it'll take a little getting used to, just as walking onto the street, separating when you meet somebody on the street, took a little getting used to, but we got there.
With the patio mapped out at Great Lakes Brewery, all that's left is training staff for this new era of service with sanitizing and spacing. But they're just excited to be back at work.
Cheers.
To patio season. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
3 men have been arrested and 2 puppies have been found after the men allegedly stole the animals during an attempted sale. The men stole the pups earlier this week near Beauvais and Conestoga. They allegedly assaulted the owner and fled with the puppies. The woman followed the car and tried to get the puppies back, but the suspects accelerated away, dragging the woman for a short distance. She sustained minor injuries. The puppies are safe and have been reunited with their owner. A Toronto judge says a former bar owner and his manager who were convicted in a violent sexual assault saw women as disposable. Justice Michael Dambrot releasing his full written reasons for sentencing Gavin McMillan and Enzo de Jesus Carrasco to 9 years behind bars in connection with the 2016 attack at the College Street bar. The assault was captured on video. Justice Dambrot said while 2 men may have presented themselves as respectful in most circumstances, their actions showed a deep sense of entitlement with regard to women and profound disrespect for the complainant. McMillan and Carrasco were each found guilty last November of gang sexual assault and administering a stupefying drug. For years, Ontario's justice system has used paper, record keeping, and even fax machines to keep the system running. But that is about to change. As John Lancaster reports, COVID-19 is bringing sweeping technological changes to our courts.
As the signs outside Toronto's Old City Hall note, the court system has essentially been shuttered except for urgent matters. It's due to COVID-19. But the pandemic is also what's going to usher in what Ontario's Attorney General says will be new, permanent technological upgrades.
When COVID hit, it really made the state of the justice system explode, because the paper-based system that we've all lived with for so long was just not sustainable.
Some traditional court hearings will be replaced by virtual hearings, especially bail applications, setting dates for trials, and court files will be digitized. John Struthers, president of the Criminal Lawyers Association, says public access will be maintained.
So when it's a video, most of the platforms have the ability to join up and to watch without participating. I've even done a case on the telephone where members of the family and members of the press participated on a conference call. We understand they have to be public courts, and they will be.
So far, Downey says 300 courtrooms have been fitted so judges can hold virtual hearings, and 149 traditional courtrooms with plexiglass shields and distancing markers are set to open up July 6th.
We have the technology out there. We've spent $1.3 million on getting laptops, digital recording devices, VPNs, allowing trials by Zoom. This stuff is happening now. So it's a matter of expanding.
Much of this change hastened by COVID-19. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
When we come back, federal health officials release new modeling on the coronavirus, with Ontario and Quebec in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. Plus, this map shows the number of COVID cases in Toronto by neighborhood. But is it using a complete set of data? Our analysis says no. Details next. It turns out the neighborhood map of COVID-19 cases released by the city last week doesn't give an accurate lay of the land. CBC News has determined that more than 2,000 cases aren't even on the map. Valerie Ouellette explains why and what that could mean for Torontonians.
For the first time since the beginning of the pandemic, Toronto's new interactive map revealed the city's hardest hit neighborhoods in a bid to encourage residents to get tested, but also to help the city strategize to distribute funds and resources. But CBC checked the math behind the map and found the count was coming up short. On Thursday morning, CBC counted more than 9,600 positive cases in the city's neighborhoods, but the overall total is 11,600. 1 in 5 cases are missing. Toronto Public Health confirmed to CBC it is missing postal codes for 2,029 confirmed COVID cases that do not appear on its map. The Public Health Agency blames testing labs for the missing data. A spokesperson explained that provincial laws ask that testing labs flag reportable diseases like COVID to public health agencies, but does not specify which personal information has to be collected and transmitted. Toronto Public Health is now saying that it is receiving incomplete reports and information from several testing labs, which are missing addresses and often postal codes, leading to delays. But the Public Health Agency was very clear on one thing: this did not affect contact tracing for these 2,000 cases. However, it might have had other consequences, according to one researcher who knows this data well.
How serious of a problem this is will largely depend on whether or not this data is missing evenly across the population, or there is certain types of people who are not answering questions. We may be missing COVID-19 hotspots, or that certain vulnerable populations may be missing in the narrative about COVID-19 in Toronto.
Toronto Public Health says it does not have the resources at the moment to chase down its missing postal codes. It told CBC it will eventually, but only after the first wave of this pandemic is over, which could take weeks. Valérie Ouellet, CBC News, Toronto.
Figures out today from federal health officials show that Ontario and Quebec accounted for more than 90% of COVID cases in Canada in the last 2 weeks. Despite those numbers, the latest models show that there has been progress, but officials warn that could change quickly. Catherine Cullen explains.
Canada has made significant progress to bring the epidemic under control.
Signs of optimism from federal health officials, and they credit Canadians following public health advice.
Everything's coming together now, and I can see it.
Ontario's premier sounded positive today.
We have a new testing strategy, a new tracing and tracking strategy, and things are going well.
But there are pressure points, notably transmission hotspots in and around Toronto and Montreal. And while most COVID cases are young and middle-aged adults, it's mostly older Canadians who are losing their lives. People over the age of 60 make up 94% of deaths, and long-term care homes account for 82% of deaths. And there have been other outbreaks in tight quarters, like meatpacking plants.
That is an absolutely vital aspect of controlling the epidemic.
We don't know to what extent racialized communities are being hit harder because there's still no national race-based data. And health officials warn the public has to remain vigilant.
These models all tell us that if we relax too much or too soon, the epidemic will most likely rebound with explosive growth as a distinct possibility.
And so health officials are reminding Canadians, keep washing your hands and distancing because lives are at stake. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, despite the modeling, Ontario announced today a loosening of restrictions when it comes to renting out Airbnbs and cottages, and owners and towns are ready to welcome the crowds and the cash.
Having people come to the community and spend money and be here is critical for our communities to survive.
The hit cottage country has already taken, thanks to COVID. Coming up next. Ontario has given the green light for people to rent cottages this summer. It's part of the province's easing of rules for short-term rentals put in place because of the pandemic. As Angelina King tells us, cottage owners are happy but say they still have to make up for lost time.
Beaverland Camp has been open since 1926. The owners were afraid if they couldn't open this year, there wouldn't be a next year. But today, a bit of relief.
It'll be good to open for next year with this now, but retirement will probably still be a year later than usual at least. We'll still probably lose 40 to 50% of our normal earnings.
Thanks to a late start to the season and their decision to only allow one household per cottage all summer.
Keeping our staff safe, keeping us safe, our customers safe, and the population of Martin River safe, because they're all retired folks up here.
With less to do this summer, cottages are in high demand.
And it's been very, very difficult.
For 2 months, Kim Kalea has been looking to rent a cottage for her family, but says prices are higher than usual and there's less to choose from.
I've spent countless hours every week looking for an affordable cottage that meets our requirements.
The co-owner of this rental website says it got busier in the last week.
The fact that people can't travel out of the country, the fact that summer camps have been shut down, and that schools have been closed for a couple months now.
And now cottage owners having to consider extra cleaning.
Just making sure all touch points have been wiped down and cleaned.
At Buttermilk Falls Resort in Algonquin Highlands, new protocol includes a virtual check-in, visitors bringing their own bedding and sanitizing water equipment after use. Plus, shared facilities like playgrounds are closed. Visits might look a little different, but just being open is important to the local economy.
Having people come to the community and spend money and be here is critical for our communities to survive.
Just because you're out of the city doesn't mean health and safety rules go out the window, especially since the GTA accounts for more than 75% of Ontario's new COVID-19 cases.
We just need to be extra sensitive to the fact that the local population's trying to be careful and safe.
And if done right, the cottage might just be the best place to physical distance. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
Politicians and business leaders held a virtual meeting today to call on the government to do more for small businesses, saying they won't survive without immediate action.
I'm a little bit saddened that we're still sitting here almost 3 months later and we're asking for two of the very same things. And it's a moratorium on evictions, and we need more stable rent relief for small businesses.
This comes as a new Broadview Danforth BIA survey shows 72% of businesses could not make all of June's rent. 427 small businesses, tenants, and 92 landlords in Toronto, Ottawa, and Guelph participated in the survey. The group says there needs to be more awareness on the supports that are there for small businesses, like the Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance. The program has been open for 1 week, and according to the survey, 61% of commercial landlords have not applied for it. The Trudeau government has been peppered with questions about when the promised extra old age security and guaranteed income supplements payments for seniors will be delivered. The answer came today.
The one-time tax-free payment for seniors will be received on the week of July the 6th.
The emergency OAS top-up is $300, and those eligible for the GIS will get an additional $200. It was announced in May, but has taken longer to get going because of efforts to ensure it's automatic and will not expose seniors to scammers or fraud. There is no need to apply or give out any information. Payments will be deposited directly into bank accounts. Schutz says the funding is aimed at helping offset higher costs seniors are facing for groceries, taxis, and pharmacy dispensing fees due to the pandemic. Some Scarborough residents were lining up today to get tested for COVID-19.
I think it's important to get tested because the more we know that there's negative cases, then we can bring the economy back and really know that our efforts have really worked.
Have to know what if you have this disease or not. You see, it's the concern of not only you but other people too.
This pop-up assessment center was set up at Lester B. Pearson Collegiate on Tapscott Road. It's part of a partnership between Toronto Public Health, the Ministry of Health, and Scarborough Health Network. All community members and essential workers who have symptoms of COVID-19 or think they may have been infected even without the systems, well, they are encouraged to get tested. Another pop-up will be set up tomorrow at Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate on Guildwood Parkway. COVID-19 shut down NBA basketball, but the league announcing plans for return to action today. Greg Ross has the details.
Here's Van Vliet, misdirection, and one.
Hearing the NBA Board of Governors had approved a format to resume play next month, the conversation amongst these basketball fans was no longer about if they return, but rather when they return.
I'm really excited that basketball is going to be back.
29 of 30 NBA teams voted in favor of a proposal that will see training camps open at the end of this month and play resume at the end of July, with all games being played at Walt Disney Resort in Florida.
It feels great. I mean, I feel it feels like, you feel a little bit normal.
Raptors play-by-play announcer Eric Smith says 22 teams have qualified to compete based on where they were in the standings when the season halted in March. It includes 16 teams that were in a playoff position and an additional 6 teams that were within 6 games of one of the final postseason berths.
Each team that is coming back is scheduled to play 8 regular season games.
The future is certainly looking brighter for the NBA, but the league still has one more hurdle to overcome before this is official.
Yeah, it opened up more teams, Greg, in the Western Conference than it did in the East, that 6-game kind of window. The Phoenix Suns in 13th place in the West are within 6 games.
The Raptors had the second best record in the Eastern Conference when play stopped, which leaves them in a very secure position if play resumes.
It has yet to be approved by the Players Association, and they're scheduled to meet on Friday.
These fans say they're just excited to see that basketball is potentially coming back, but they still have high hopes for their Raptors.
I think you should feel confident if you're a Raptor fan in saying that at the very least, you're going to be one of the top 3 seeds. But
they have a lot of defense. They have Pascal Siakam, and I think that they still can make it.
I mean, they're looking pretty good before all this happens.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Yo, that little one has skills, eh? Did you see that dribbling?
Yeah. First of all, I like the outlook, but then, yeah, checking out those skills, awesome.
We can talk ball later because we know we're happy it's back. I want to hear more about how Markham was feeling like Montego Bay today.
I know. I feel like there should be an award for this, right? That's right. Markham, Ontario, not just the hotspot in Ontario, but all of the nation at 30.7. That was as of 4 p.m. today, anyway. We have what looks like a pretty nice evening on our hands. I had mentioned that isolated shower risk, but really things are looking pretty good. Now, the change comes tomorrow later in the day. It's not going to be isolated. We are going to see some scattered showers, thunderstorm risk there. Not likely like the storms we had the other night, but there could be some strong winds here and some small hail potential tomorrow. And then our temperatures on the weekend, they're headed back to seasonal. It's going to be a steamy one tomorrow, but then back to seasonal. However, by next Tuesday, they're going right back up above seasonal again. So a few days of more comfortable air for the weekend. These are the current temperatures now at 28 degrees. You factor in the humidity. It's not really actually that bad, and certainly there's relief towards the lakeshore, but it feels like 32 for the city at the moment. Some action to the south of us, not seeing that on our satellite radar imagery, though, here for the GTA or for southern and eastern Ontario. But watch as I take this through. Now, tomorrow morning, there could be a bit of patchy fog, especially back towards southwestern Ontario. But let's go towards tomorrow afternoon. Okay, a little rogue cell trying to pop up, not having much luck. But then as we're getting into the later afternoon, early evening, then we start to see a line kind of developing here as that front, that new air mass kind of pushes in here and lifts that air. So we get into some scattered showers. Not everyone's going to see wet weather, but the risk there, so be prepared for it, and that lingers into the evening. Then Saturday, it looks good for the GTA. Sunday as well. It's just Saturday afternoon, eastern Ontario, Kingston and beyond. You could get into some wet conditions there as the day wears on. Tonight's temperatures, they're in the mid-teens for the most part for us. And then tomorrow, those readings are going right back up there towards 29. We may see a few 30s popping up again. We'll see if someone can be the hot spot in Canada. Again, there's the cool down for the weekend. Dry, a nice weekend ahead, closer to seasonal for Sunday. And then Monday's the in-between day, and here we go again on Tuesday. I've got some real heat coming for midweek next week too, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
An annual memorial to the victims of the massacre in Tiananmen Square has become a politically charged event in Hong Kong. Thousands of people defied a police ban and gathered to mark the 31st anniversary of the deadly crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrations by the government of China. We'll have more after the break. Another high-profile case involving the death of an unarmed black man in the U.S. is playing out in court.
Greg McMichael knew that Travis McMichael had a shotgun. I do not believe that Greg McMichael thought that Travis McMichael had a shotgun for decorative purposes or that he had it for the purpose that he may use it.
A preliminary hearing taking place in Georgia into the February shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery. The father and son charged with his murder appeared by video link. Travis McMichael is accused of firing the shot that killed the 25-year-old who was out jogging at the time. His father, Gregory McMichael, was in the back of a pickup truck that pursued Arbery. A Georgia Bureau of Investigation officer who testified today said one of the accused was overheard using a racial slur against Arbery after he had been shot. The judge ruling today the case against the men meets the probable cause threshold. U.S. Attorney General William Barr held a news conference in Washington today. He acknowledged this is a day of mourning and recognized the lack of confidence Black Americans have in the criminal justice system. He said his department will do its part to bring about change And he also claimed that the ongoing protests across the country are being hijacked by agitators.
We have evidence that Antifa and other similar extremist groups, as well as actors of a variety of different political persuasions, have been involved in instigating and participating in the violent activity. And we are also seeing foreign actors playing all sides to exacerbate the violence.
Barr says there have been 51 arrests made for federal crimes during the protest, but he's pleased the last 2 nights have been relatively peaceful. However, this morning, additional fencing was set up around the White House, and the law enforcement presence in the U.S. Capitol remains high. Democratic leaders say the increased numbers, including many unidentified officers, is alarming. Since the George Floyd protests began, a number of social media posts have popped up showing piles of bricks. Some claim they were staged to bait demonstrators into violence. Others claim the protesters were going to use them to attack police. Katie Nicholson looked into whether the posts are being used to misinform.
It's not just bricks. Accusations are also being hurled about who is responsible for this destruction. On Monday, President Trump pushed the idea that outside agitators were behind much of the conflict.
Our nation has been gripped by professional anarchists, violent mobs, arsonists, looters, criminals, rioters, Antifa, and others.
Today, the White House doubled down on that idea, going so far as to suggest activists and professional anarchists are invading our communities, staging bricks and weapons to instigate violence. That post and its accompanying video was taken down, and with good reason.
This is all unfounded.
This investigative researcher says that hasn't stopped mythmongers from blaming everyone, from undercover police to the far right, to Antifa to the far left, for planting bricks to goad protesters into violence.
I think it's really important that people don't point fingers at this time when we don't have the fact checking and the correct information.
But brick by brick, fact checkers are getting to the bottom of these posts. Like this video in Los Angeles.
I don't know, man. That don't look right to me.
A Jewish community center clarified it placed them there to protect its property.
Some random ass bricks, bro. Ain't no construction.
And these, not so random. Video evidence shows they were there before George Floyd was killed.
So even though the White House account took down that video, the damage is already done. They have amplified conspiracy theories through this video and through posting it on the official White House account.
CBC News asked the White House why it posted those claims and then later removed them. The White House did not respond. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
An annual memorial to the victims of the massacre in Tiananmen Square has become a politically charged event in Hong Kong. This year, it comes as China moves to impose new restrictions in the semi-autonomous territory. Richard Kimber now with the details.
A passionate show of defiance here in Hong Kong as many thousands of pro-democracy protesters gathered despite a police ban on having a large-scale commemorative event for the victims of the Tiananmen Square protest crackdown back in 1989. The passion's really spilling over from frustrations over 2 pieces of legislation. One, the national security law being imposed on Hong Kong from China, and the second, a national anthem bill being pushed through in the Hong Kong legislature, suddenly now criminalising any dissent towards the Chinese national anthem. While there's some sympathy in Hong Kong towards the need for these types of rules to try and stabilise society here, ultimately it's really enraging a lot of pro-democracy protesters who think that basically the freedoms of Hong Kong's traditions are being eroded step by step, and that's what's drawing so many people out to commemorate the Tiananmen Vigil tonight, even in spite of this very clear police ban.
After the break, today's frontline hero. Stick around, we'll be right back. Tahika Shand is a youth worker and shift coordinator with Covenant House Toronto, and her colleague says she's worked tirelessly throughout the COVID-19 pandemic to ensure the youth there are well taken care of. Michael Shiner tells us Shand has taken extra shifts to check on those struggling with mental illness, which may be exacerbated by physical distancing measures. He also told us that Tahika has come up with creative art-based wellness programming such as slime making to help youth de-stress, sand mosaics and coloring exercises which are designed to engage youth and help them spend their time in meaningful ways. Although COVID-19 has made her work more challenging, she wouldn't trade it for anything else because she loves making a difference in the lives of youth experiencing homelessness. So, Tahika, thank you so much for all you're doing over at Covenant House. That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has your next local news tonight at 11 after the National. We're going to see you back here tomorrow night at 6. Have a great night, everybody, especially those folks in Markham where it's so warm today. It's feeling like Montego Bay. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.